Happy Friday, everyone. And you might want to double check your calendar because it is literally Friday, the 13th, February 2026.
Which just feels so appropriate for the mountain of data we're about to climb today.
It really does. And, we have to mention the date for another reason. The Environmental Working Group, the EWG, they just flagged that today is the 1-year anniversary of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. being sworn in as Health Secretary.
Ah, yes.
And let's just say they are not popping champagne over there. Their press release calls it an unlucky day for public health.
Yeah, you can really feel the tension in that statement.
Right.
But honestly, that kind of friction is the perfect setup for what we're trying to do here today.
Right.
This isn't just about politics. We are attempting a full-body MRI on America's water.
Exactly. And I want to be super clear about our mission. We're not just, skimming headlines. We have the ASCE 2025 infrastructure report card that just dropped. We have the latest tap water database from the EWG.
And we're going into the actual laws themselves. The Clean Water Act, the Safe Drinking Water Act. We're going to follow the drop of water from the river.
All the way through the treatment plant, through those aging pipes.
And right into your glass. And just a fair warning, the story this data tells is, well, it's complicated. It's a mix of good news, some really bad news, and a lot of legal complexity.
It really is. Because if you just glanced at the headline from this new infrastructure report, you'd think things are great. For the first time in forever, the U.S. got an overall grade of C.
Which, for civil engineers, that's practically an A+A. We've been stuck at a D+ for decades.
Exactly. But, and this is the real puzzle we have to solve, while the overall grade went up, water got left behind, it just stalled. So, let's start right there. The grades. Break it down for us. How did water actually do?
It's not good. If this is your kid's report card, you'd be grounding them. Drinking water got a D.
Or D.
Wastewater did a little better with a D+A. And stormwater, which is arguably becoming the most critical piece of the puzzle with climate change, also a D.
Straight Ds across the board. That's tough to hear, especially when you think about, didn't we just spend a historic amount of money on this? The IIJA, all that infrastructure money, billions for lead pipes. How does the grade not move at all?
That is the funding paradox.
Yeah.
And to get it, you have to look at how Congress actually moves money, not just how they announce it. It's kind of a classic shell game.
Okay, walk me through that.
So, you're right. On paper, record investment, about $50 billion for water sounds amazing. But the report highlights this little mechanism called congressional reallocation.
That sounds like a very polite way of saying robbing Peter to pay Paul.
That is exactly what it is. Look, states rely on these things called state revolving funds, SRFs. They're basically block grants.
Yeah.
The federal government gives a state a chunk of money, and the local engineers, the experts on the ground.
They decide what needs fixing.
Right. They know if Toledo needs a new plant or if Jackson needs new pipes. It's planned. It's consistent. But between 22 and 23, Congress brought back earmarks. They took over $1 billion out of those funds.
Out of the expert funds.
And redirected it to their own pet projects in their districts. So instead of funding based on need, it becomes funding based on politics.
And the numbers are bad, aren't they?
They're brutal. That one move caused a nearly 45% reduction in the base grants going to states. So while you hear historic investment on the news, the actual utility manager trying to keep your water safe saw their reliable funding cut in half.
So that's the stall. It's like your boss promising you a huge bonus, but then cutting your salary to pay for it. You're not actually getting ahead.
Not at all. And you see it in the data. The report says the rate at which we're replacing wastewater plants dropped from 3% a year to 2%.
Is a 1% drop really that big of a deal?
It's massive when you look at the timeline. Think about it. Most of these plants were built in the 70s after the Clean Water Act. They're designed to last 40, maybe 50 years.
So they're all hitting their expiration date right now.
All at once. So
Okay.
slowing down the replacement rate, just as they're all starting to fail, you're just building a huge backlog of failure.
And speaking of backlogs, there was a stat in there about wastewater that just blew my mind. 66 million Americans, 1 in 5 people, are still on septic tanks.
And that number hasn't changed since 2017.
Why is that a problem? I mean, septic tanks can work, right?
They work until they don't, or until the area floods. Septic failure is a huge cause of groundwater contamination. The fact that we're not expanding water and treatment to these areas means we're just holding our breath, hoping nothing goes wrong.
Which I guess brings us to that third D grade, stormwater. The ASCE called it the most important new category. Why the big focus there all of a sudden?
Because the weather is fundamentally different now. A warmer atmosphere holds more water. So when it rains, it doesn't just rain, it pours, it dumps. Flooding is now a top 3 most costly threat to communities nationwide.
Our systems were built for 1970s rain, not 2026 rain.
Exactly. And this gets to something else in the report, something really subtle. Did you catch the change in language they used this year?
I did. It seemed like they were shying away from the word sustainability.
And leaning really hard on the word resilience.
Yeah.
And it's not just swapping synonyms. I think it's a philosophical admission of defeat.
Whoa. Defeat? What do you mean?
Well, think about what the words mean. Sustainability is optimistic, right? It's strategic.
Yeah.
It's about building efficient systems, reducing impact, preventing problems.
Okay, so trying to keep things in balance.
Exactly. Resilience is tactical. It's
Yeah.
about survival. The engineering definition is the ability to withstand a shock and recover quickly. It assumes failure is inevitable. It assumes the flood is coming. It assumes the pipe will burst.
So sustainability is trying to steer the ship away from the iceberg, and resilience is just making sure you have enough lifeboats because you know you're going to hit it.
That's the perfect analogy. And for the ASCE to make that shift tells you everything. We've moved from trying to prevent disaster to just trying to manage it.
That's really sobering.
It is. We're on defense now.
Okay, so that's the hardware, the pipes, the money. But the pipes don't matter if the water in them isn't safe. Let's talk about the software. The laws. And I have to admit, I always get these confused. Clean Water Act, Safe Drinking Water Act.
They sound similar, but they govern 2 totally different universes.
Okay, so break it down for us.
Right, let's start with the Clean Water Act, 1972. This is all about surface water, rivers, lakes, streams. And the goal was so simple and beautiful. Make America's waters fishable and swimmable.
Fishable and swimmable. I love that. So how are we doing?
Horribly. I mean, the data shows over half of all our river and stream miles are still considered impaired, still violating the standards.
Wait, half. Half of our rivers are still legally too polluted to fish or swim in?
Yep. And the reason why is a flaw in the law itself. See, the CWA is great at regulating point sources.
Like a pipe coming out of a factory.
Exactly. You can see the pipe, you can measure what comes out, you can find the company. Easy. But the law is terrible at what we call non-point sources.
Which is runoff.
It's runoff. It's fertilizer washing off a giant farm. It's oil from a highway. It doesn't come from one pipe. It comes from everywhere. And you can't put a permit on everywhere.
And to make matters worse, the law actually just got weaker, didn't it? The Supreme Court ruling. Sackett v. EPA.
Oh, it was massive. And it all came down to a really basic question. What counts as water?
Which seems like it should be obvious.
You would think, but it was about wetlands. For years, the rule was something called the significant nexus test. If a wetland was chemically or biologically connected to a river, it was protected.
Because water flows underground, right? I mean, that just makes sense.
Scientifically, yes.
Yeah.
But the Supreme Court threw that out. They said, for a wetland to be protected now, it has to have a continuous surface connection to a major waterway.
So, if there's a small patch of dry land or a dirt road between the wetland and the river,
It's no longer federally protected. You can fill it in. You can build on it.
that feels so arbitrary.
The effect is that up to half of all the wetlands in the U.S. might have just lost federal protection. And wetlands are nature's kidneys. They filter the water. So now more pollution is just flowing straight into the rivers.
So the Clean Water Act protects the river, but not the things that keep the river clean. Okay. Let's pivot to the water that comes out of my tap. The Safe Drinking Water Act, SDWA.
Right. So this law covers public water systems, about 148,000 of them.
But not private wells.
Correct. And that is a huge blind spot. 13% of American households are on private wells. If that's you, you are your own water utility. No one is testing it for you.
And it doesn't cover bottled water either, does it?
Nope, that's the FDA. And their rules are often less strict than for tap water.
Now, even for those of us on public water, there are some strange loopholes. I was reading about the Halliburton loophole. It sounds like a conspiracy theory.
It's very real. It was an amendment in 2005 that exempted hydraulic fracking from the SCWA's rules on underground injection.
What does that mean in practice?
Normally, if you want to pump chemicals deep underground, you have to prove to the EPA that you won't contaminate drinking water aquifers. But this loophole says if you're doing it for fracking, you don't have to. You get a pass.
Which brings us to the chemicals. Because it seems like what's legal in our water and what's safe are two very different things.
That is the entire argument of the Environmental Working Group. We assume that if the government says the water is legal, it must be healthy.
Yeah, you trust the tap?
But the EPA's legal limits, the MCLs, They're a compromise. They're based on health, sure, but also on the cost of removal and political pressure.
So a limit could be 10 parts per billion, not because 9 is safe, but because getting it lower is too expensive for the utility to manage.
Exactly. The EWG database looks only at the health guideline. What do scientists say is actually safe? And the gap between the legal limit and the health limit it's huge.
The big one everyone talks about now is PFAS.
The forever chemicals.
Yeah.
They're called that because they just don't break down. Not in the environment, not in your body. They just build up.
And it's in the water for 143 million people.
Almost half the country.
Yeah.
Now, to be fair, in 2024, the Biden EPA did set the first ever national limits for 6 types of PFAS. That was historic. But the EWG is sounding the alarm that those rules are fragile. They're worried the new administration might try to roll them back to, reduce the burden on industry.
And it's not just new chemicals. I saw chromium-6 on their list. That's the Aaron Brockovich chemical.
Yep, hexavalent chromium, a known carcinogen. It's in the water of about 250 million Americans.
And there has to be a limit on that.
There isn't, not a specific one. The EPA only regulates total chromium, which lumps the toxic form in with the harmless kind. There is no federal limit for cancer-causing chromium-6.
That's unbelievable. After all this time, after the movie, the lawsuits, nothing.
Not at the federal level, though.
Is there any good news on the chemistry front?
There's one major bright spot.
Yeah.
And that's lead.
The lead pipes.
Yes. In late 2024, the EPA finalized a new lead and copper rule. And it is aggressive. It mandates the removal of all lead service lines in the country within 10 years.
All of them.
All of them. And it lowers the action level. It's a huge step forward. The clock is officially ticking on lead.
Okay, so we've got stalling infrastructure, shrinking laws, and a gap between legal and safe. But whenever systems fail, they don't fail for everyone equally. There's an equity piece to this, isn't there?
And that's maybe the toughest part of all this research. There's a report on tribal water access in the Colorado River Basin.
And here we're not just talking about contaminated water. We're talking about no water at all.
Exactly. No indoor plumbing. The report shows Native American households are many times more likely to lack piped water than white households in 2026.
In the United States of America.
Yeah. It means hauling water in barrels from a central location. It's time-consuming, it's expensive, and that water quality is often poor.
And the report made this direct, devastating link between that reality and the COVID-19 pandemic.
It did. The number one piece of advice was wash your hands. Well, if you have to haul every gallon of water you use, you can't do that. And they correlate that directly to the higher death rates among elders in those communities.
There was that quote from Jonathan Nez, the Navajo Nation president, Toe Ina'ate.
Water is life.
It sounds like a slogan, but in this context, it's literal.
And the report makes a point that's crucial for everyone listening. You can't wall off a public health crisis. A virus hotspot in one community that lacks clean water is a threat to the health of the entire nation.
So if we zoom all the way out, what's the final diagnosis here? We've got engineers telling us to prepare for failure, the Supreme Court reducing protections, and scientists telling us our legal water might not be safe.
I think the diagnosis is that the era of set it and forget it water is over. For 50 years, we just kind of assumed safe water would come out of the tap and the government had it handled. Now it's an era of active risk management. That shift to resilience says it all. We're admitting the system is fragile. It feels like we're moving from clean water as a guarantee to clean water as a challenge.
It also feels like more of the burden is falling on the individual. Like, it's my job now to figure out if my water is safe.
To some extent, yeah. Information is really your best tool.
So, okay, let's be practical. For the listener at home who's now giving their kitchen faucet the side eye, what can they do?
First, knowledge. Your utility is required by law to send you a consumer confidence report every year. Don't throw it out. Read it. It lists their violations.
And the EWG database.
Absolutely. Go to their website, type in your ZIP code. It'll show you what's in your water that might be legal but exceeds health guidelines. Then, if you see high levels of something like PFAS, get the right filter. A simple pitcher filter might not cut it. You may need reverse osmosis or a specific carbon filter.
It's a shame it's come to that, but it sounds like that's where we are.
That's where we are. Water isn't a solved problem. It's an ongoing crisis.
I want to leave everyone with one final thought. We talked about that shift to resilience, right? The idea of just assuming things will break. If our engineering plan is to manage failure and our legal plan is to limit federal protection, Are we designing a future where clean, safe water becomes a luxury good?
That's the billion-dollar question, isn't it? Is the goal still fishable, swimmable, drinkable for everybody,
Hmm.
or is it just good enough for those who can afford the extra layer of protection?
Something to think about. Stay safe out there.
And stay curious.